Hi everyone, welcome to Sheffield Doc Fest. Welcome to this panel discussion, Stories of Other Animals, with Robin Petré, Danielle Celermajer, Patrice Jones and Victor Kossakovsky. So this talk is part of the DocFest Exchange programme, which is a section of the festival supported by the Wellcome Trust, to make a space for conversations around climate change and about the health of the planet, including humans and non-human inhabitants. So the idea this year, or the theme for this year of the DocFest Exchange, is called Beyond Our Own Eyes. And it's asking how we might appreciate or become sensitive to perspectives beyond the individual and beyond the human, and what this might open up to, or how this might help us to sort of change our relationship to each other and to the rest of the natural world through looking from, or trying to look from, different perspectives. So I'll just quickly introduce each of our panelists, which we are incredibly honoured to have. It's such an amazing group of storytellers, filmmakers, activists, writers. So I'll start with Victor because I can see him. So Victor is a very well-known director. Probably everyone who's here will know his work, and we are showing his film GUNDA in the festival this year, which is a film about a pig called GUNDA, as well as about chickens and cows, in which appears to be all in one place, but is you see in the credits is actually filmed in many places, which maybe we'll speak about later. We also have Robin, who is the director of From the Wild Sea, a film about marine wildlife on the coast of UK and elsewhere in Europe, that looks at the volunteers who are trying to save these animals, but also looks at, or tries to give us a sense of the animal perspective, how an animal might experience this rehabilitation and this sort of trying to be helped, which is probably quite a, stressful or crazy experience for these mammals and birds. Danielle Celermajer is joining us from Australia, where it's evening. Danielle is a professor and a writer, working around sociology, social policy, and especially around multi-species justice. And I'm sure you will share a bit more about this later, Danielle. She lives in a community, an intentional multi-species community in the unceded land of the Darawal people on the southeast coast of Australia. And her book, she has wrote a book called Summertime, which is, she wrote after the wildfires in Australia in 2019-20. And especially one article, which I think is relevant for this discussion, is what you wrote about Jimmy the pig, who lived with you and lived through these fires. And we also have Patrice Jones, who is a writer, activist, and runs an sanctuary, an LGBTQ+-led sanctuary for farmed animals in USA, in Vermont. Again, Patrice, I will let you speak about it more later, but Patrice works at the intersection of social justice and activism and animal rights, both theory, practical, and is a storyteller yourself. So I think, all of us, or all of you, sorry, make films or tell stories in different ways using different mediums. They all try to represent animals or try to speak with animals on behalf of animals, or at least to appreciate the perspectives of other animals. So maybe the best place to start is, I know Danielle and Patrice have watched Robin and Victor's films, so maybe we could start, Danielle. If you said you had some reflections on the films, maybe this could begin our conversation. And for our audience, please feel free to write in the chat at any point any questions that you have, and we'll pass these through to our panel.
Thank you. It's such an honour to be on a panel with these three people, with these three souls. And like you said, Jamie, I am speaking from the unceded lands and waters of the Darawal people. And so I just want to commence by paying my respect to elders past and present, and my gratitude for the care that they and the multi-species relations in which they are embedded have taken of this land so that I can now live here. So I wanted to start not so much analytically, but just saying a few words about the impact that these two films had in my body. Because one of the problems with telling stories or trying to represent violence or suffering, especially of the more than human, is that as storytellers, we have to contend with the prodigious talents that human beings have at abstracting, at receiving these representations as if they're just that, representations, and leaving our visceral experience untouched. And both of the films, both GUNDA and From the Wild Sea, reminded me of the capacity that film as an art form has to bring you up really close. And I think that's just politically such an important achievement. Both of the films really left an impression in my body. I walked away carrying the truth in time of the experience of the animals that you depicted. And they didn't recede when I shut the screen, they stayed with me. I remain conscious that those beings, whether they're still alive, if they're no longer alive, the ones who stand with them are still there. You know, if GUNDA is still alive, she's still having her children taken away. The extraordinary giant whale at the end of From the Wild Sea, that she really did experience having her body cut apart by that ship. That happened, that is happening. And I just think that sense that this is not something that is just appearing on the screen, but really that we carry away from us, knowing that as we move through the world, they're moving through the world, is the most important thing that politically that storytelling can do. Across the two films, I was really struck by the multi-dimensional nature of the violence that they depicted and the structural nature of the violence that they depicted. You know, everything from enslaving female animals so that we can profit from their reproductive capacities, to poisoning animals' bodies with the plastic that we don't even know, we don't even notice is wrapped around our lives, the shipping transport that undergirds globalization, that ends up cutting animals' bodies and soaking those swans in that kind of viscous black stuff. And of course, you know, most of all, climate change, which is a form of violence that we don't even recognize as violence, but undergirds everything. And after I watched The Wild Sea, I decided to look up the etymology of the word wild. And it comes from Old English and Old Norse and Old German, and I've written it down. It says, in the natural state, uncultivated, untamed, undomesticated. So, you know, as with the contemporary usage, it's like what is outside the control of human beings, or at least human beings who live in a particular way, which isn't all humans. But the other meaning of wild, a kind of linked but slightly different one, is out of control. And thinking about the film and my own experience of living through the wildfires in Australia, is that those two meanings, uncultivated and out of control, had an intrinsic link in the sense that they both meant outside the purview of dominating human beings. But now, because we have interfered so much and so systemically with this zone of the wild, that kind of synthesis has been pulled apart. So the wild has been turned against itself. And safety under those conditions, as you depicted so powerfully, is a bathtub or the back of a car. And yet listening to those radio announcements, it was so resonant for me of, you know, that towards the end of the film, take shelter. I could hear those words that rang through the radio here through the months of December and January of the Black Summer fires. Take shelter as the fire is approaching. And of course, it's us, humans, who can take shelter, because the shelter of those other beings has been completely destroyed. So it was just that whole notion of what is wild, where how much we've invaded was very present. And then I just wanted to say, because I've talked for long enough, but I wanted to say a few words about GUNDA, because I live with pigs, and I've also tried to tell stories about the violence that we inflict on pigs, the slow violence and the fast violence. And part of what motivated me to do that was because the pigs with whom I live gifted me with the experience of the depth and the complexity of their emotional and their relational lives. And, you know, part of human exceptionalism is that we think that we humans are the only ones who have these kind of deep, complex lives. And what I found so compelling about GUNDA was it didn't just depict the complexity or the depth of her emotions, but it did that across time and slowly. So from when she first had her babies to when they were stolen from her, you got to recognize that she wasn't just having a reaction to kind of violent events, but she was doing this really complex emotional work of navigating a world where human violence is always kind of hanging over her world. And I just wanted to mention that because it seems to me that, you know, we're talking about telling stories about other animals. And if we're going to do that in a way that can break apart the ideologies that legitimate the violence and the exploitation, those stories really need to have the type of kind of rich fabric of their worlds, so that they're not just the objects, but we get to kind of get right up close across time, in ways that we can see that they're both different to us, but also relatable. So I, you know, as someone who tries to tell stories, I just was very moved by the way that you both did that.
Thanks, Danielle. I don't know if Victor or Robin, you would like to respond or answer. Victor.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your words. I don't know. You started so deeply. Maybe. Okay, let's go deeper then. I think the problem started before. Like if you read Bible first page, it's written mistake there. It's written that first day God made darkness and light, and then earth and air, and then plants and animals, and then God made human to rule all of this. And I was always stuck here in the first page. I said, hey, wait a second, I don't want to read second page. It's in the first page written mistake. Why we have to rule all this? Why we are exceptional? Why we are better than animals? Why we are better than plants? Why we have to dominate this? Then if you read philosophy, then in Greek antique philosophy is also this expression that man is measure of everything, right? It's again something wrong here. Why we are the ones who? So I remember when I was I was 3 years old and I was working. It was I always think it's always your personality. It's always connected to your first memory of your childhood. Maybe I'm wrong, but I remember that I was 3 years old and we were just walking on the street with my mom in St. Petersburg, Leningrad at the time. And it was a kind of plant bush, a little bush on the street. And I just cut one leaf. And my mom said to me, why did you cut the leaf? And I said, look how beautiful is it, like beautiful. And she said, take one hair and cut it. Is it painful? I said, yeah, it's painful. So the bush feels pain as well. So don't do this. Then when I was 4 years old, I had little, when I grew in St. Petersburg, I grew up in St. Petersburg. I spent a few months in a village in countryside. And I was 4, and it was little piglet, 1 month old there. And he became my best friend, like really best friend. And we sharing life together, running mess, making mess, and enjoying life. And then he understood me. I knew he knows what my feelings. I knew he's like really best friend. And then, of course, on Christmas time, he became dinner for my relatives. And of course, for me, it was tragic, right? So then I didn't know what to do. I wanted to be filmmaker, but then at the same time, I wanted to be someone who protect animals. And I start to help rangers, like who goes to the forest. And when I was teenager, I started to help forestmen who protect animals from the hunting, and so who find animals trap in any hunting tools and help them. And I was happy to help them. And then I noticed after they just save life of the bear or elk or antelope or pig, or wild pig. And then in the same very time, they come in to the dinner and they eat cow and pig. And I kind of did not understand how is it. Then I look around and I notice that everyone who has pet at home, we know they are sensitive, they're clever, they are not something, they're each of them with personality. They're someone definitely, they have conscience, they have, they can share emotions, they can enjoy life, they can be happy, they can suffer, they can sacrifice, they can make jokes. We know all of this. And at the same time, we give to our kids toys. When our kids born, we give them toys like dolphin, elephant, whale, lion, cow, bull. We tell them story about animals. And very same time, we give them food which was just alive a minute ago or 1 year ago. And I don't understand this contradiction. I don't understand how we allow ourselves not to think, to block, and not to. We know that animals are not something. We know each of them is someone. And same very time, we block our mind and we allow ourselves to kill them and eat them without even thinking. Imagine that each of us eat like from 90 kilogram meat in Europe to 120 kilogram meat in America, North America. In a year, it's like last year, the new numbers just came. Last year, we killed 1.5 billion pigs. 1.5 billion pigs. Isn't it disaster? It's just like 66 billion chicken last year. Isn't it catastrophe? Plus almost 500 million cows and goats and sheep and rabbits and ducks, and what we are doing, and trillion fish, what we are doing. We are like killing machine. I don't understand how we can not notice it, how we can, I simply don't understand us. Why we are important, why we dominate, why, as Leonardo da Vinci said, we are dominating planet just because, not because we are most intelligent, because we are most cruel one. We are most cruel one. And I don't understand one thing. We can simply divide us into big group. We can say one of us believe in God, right? And one of us believe in evolution. One group. If you believe in God, you believe in soul, at least in our understanding of God in Europe, like Christian world and so on. But look at Gunda, she has soul as well. You can see it, right? But if you believe in evolution, you clearly know evolution is something which never stops. And it means after us will be different creatures. Sooner or later, tomorrow, in 100 years, will be new creature more clever than us and maybe more cruel than us. And they will eat our kids. It's so simple to understand. No, we just continue stupid destroying behavior. That's why I'm not surprised that COVID came. It's just absurd what we do. And I thank you for being here and listening my speech, stupid speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. I was just wondering, Patrice, maybe to respond to what Victor's saying as well, as like, yeah, when we hear these numbers that are completely incomprehensible as well, like billions, we speak of billions, and I think this is also in your work, Danielle and Robin. Yeah, I don't know. How do we deal with this? Because I think as an activist and as someone working on such a practical project as yours, where it is taking animals that have lived through, I don't know, farm experience, like agriculture. Yeah, how do we deal with this? And does storytelling help us by connecting with sort of individuals? Does this help us come to terms with what these numbers might mean?
Yeah, so I'm here at Vine Sanctuary in Vermont, USA, where about our multi-species community includes about 700 formerly farmed animals of all sorts, cows and sheep and chickens and ducks and everybody. And we also reserve about half our land as wildlife refuge. And so, yes, it's a very practical project. And so I'm particularly interested in the practicalities of storytelling, finding ways to tell stories that are, you know, duly accurate and respectful of our non-human community members, while at the same time likely to persuade human animals, being a particular kind of animal that's motivated in particular kinds of ways, to think differently about non-human animals, to behave differently, and to somehow resituate ourselves as within the larger, much larger than human world. And I think I wrote down when Victor was talking about the contradictions, and how he doesn't understand how do people live with these contradictions. And we could talk about human psychology and how it is we live with contradictions, but we do know that for people, when they become aware of their contradictions, and that causes discomfort. And so storytelling in a way that in an embodied way, as Danny said, makes people aware, not just consciously, but emotionally and in their bodies of the contradictions. I think that's the key. And there's a way that each of these films does that. I was really, it was quite an experience for me to watch each of these films. I loved how in From the Wild Sea, Robin, you, even though there were people all through, the effort at all times was to have us be aware of and feel true empathy. That's the other key, right? Not just experiencing your contradictions, but actually feeling fully embodied empathy. And there were so many ways that you drew our attention to what the experience of these seals, or these, were they swans? especially when you showed them looking, because that's something that humans can really identify with, is looking, and trying to figure things out by looking and seeing. Like, we do that ourselves. So, in an embodied way, we sort of feel it when the and the way that you then situated it, although within the larger violence, the various images where just suddenly they're the giant boats and the machines. And then it was a total sensory experience, because then we're hearing the weather reports, and I just love the way that the weather reports just kept reminding us of climate change, of that ongoing emergency, even as we're focusing in on this one emergency that this one animal is experiencing. I just felt that was so powerful, and really different from the ways, both films are really different from the more didactic films that are created in order to provoke people to think differently about animals, or to go vegan. I think because they were so focused on the animals' experiences, rather than so often, because people are trying to appeal to other humans, they'll make a film about wildlife rehabbers where the rehabbers are heroes, and they're the center of the story, right? And I just loved how the humans were all through this story, but they absolutely were not the center. And we got to sort of see, a sense of other possibilities, because we saw in their behavior, and even in the behavior of the bystanders. On the one hand, we saw sometimes the just sort of gawking crowds of cluelessly behaving humans, but we also saw in so many scenes the ways that the people, they want the seal to be okay and to go back into the water, and they want the birds to go out, and they even gather to watch them go back out. And see, that's in people too, right? That's what's in contradiction with our bad behavior. And so I've come to feel more and more that ways, anything that we can do that makes that possibility of a different relationship visible, that sort of taps into and calls to that part of humans that wants the swans to be well, is an extremely powerful thing. And I just loved the way that you did that. And I obviously have lots of thoughts about GUNDA as well, but maybe Robin wants to say something.
Yeah, maybe I could just add one thing, Robin, because we showed, so for the audience, we will write these links in the chat. You can still watch the films online until Sunday, but I watched Robin's film again in the cinema on Wednesday, and I don't know if the sound was more than it should be, but yeah, it was so shocking when there's a scene with swans that have just been released back into the sort of canal, and then this massive boat with the boxes, like transport ship thing comes in, and the whole cinema rumbled. It was so violent. It was like, but yeah, Robin, I don't know if you would like to respond, and also about this, how you represent or try to represent in different ways the unseen, whether that's an animal conscious or this like wave of climate change that is still abstract, even though we all know it. How do you represent something like this in a sensual way?
Right. I barely know where to start. Like, you've all said so many interesting things that resonate so much with the work with this film, from the first idea till the film as it is now. But first of all, thank you so much, Patrice and Danielle, for your comments. Danielle, you were talking about the definition of the word wild, which I think is so interesting for me. From the Wild Sea is very much about the future and where we're headed in terms of the future for nature. And if it even makes sense of talking about wilderness and wild anymore. I feel like ecosystems and habitats are shrinking. And in the end, I mean, we're going to be like just having patches of so-called nature surrounded by humans who are watching and controlling populations of animals. I I feel like there are so few wild animals left. Actually, I read just recently that it's something like, I don't remember the exact number, but I think it's something like 94% or so of the biomass on Earth is humans and our domestic animals. So it really feels like wildlife is pressured from all around. And then this whole, like, another huge question for me in From the Wild Sea is when and how do you take care of a wild animal in a hospital? Like, should you interfere? Should you just let nature take its course and let the animals die? But if we have pressured nature so much that the animals are dying because of us, because of oil, plastic pollution, does it then change? Like, does it then push this line? Because, I mean, I think that a lot of people would agree, if there was no plastic and no oil in the oceans, then we probably shouldn't set in with animal ambulances and take them out of the sea and put them in this hospital setting, right? Then we should just leave them be, let nature be nature. But this is the problem. What is nature today? Like, how far have we already come out? And where are we headed? And this is, for me, a transcending question in the whole film. And it really comes back to the question of, what does wild mean? Because I'm not sure it means the same today as it used to. So that's really, really interesting to talk about. And of course, like, the whole representation, like, Jamie, you were mentioning in the introduction also that it's also a film following this work of the volunteers and what they're doing, but it's also even more so following, like, the animals and their look back at what the volunteers are doing. So it's continuous, this gaze back and forth, that sort of the whole film builds upon that. And what I really wanted to do more than anything from the beginning of this project was to give this different kind of view back on us. Because for me, even though the film, it very much tries to let the animals exist as people in the film. The human beings are people, the animals are people, they're all equal. For me, I wanted to give them the same respect in the film and let them all be someone, instead of this more conventional approach where an animal is explained by a human voice over or text, like this more traditional animal documentary, nature documentary, where everything is so run through like a process of human explanation. So it's like we translate all the time nature to a language that we think we understand. But I think there's another language underneath that is intuitive, that is, like you, Patrice, you mentioned this this thing of looking, like the animals are looking at us in the film. And that's universal, whether it's a pig or a seal or it's a human, we all share something, we recognize something. When a seal is looking right back at the camera and looking at the audience and looking at me as a filmmaker who was there filming this, it's something recognizable and universal to all of us. And I mean, there's so much to say, but I really wanted to try to break down this barrier, this distance between the humans and the animals in the film. So you feel like you're in there in this experience with them and taking them seriously as someone who's having an experience and not just an object that we are controlling and deciding the fate of, which also taps back to this thing of what is wilderness, because we also control what animals we save. If there's an oil spill or climate change is happening, plastic pollution, that we don't have the capacity to save every species. So who do we save? Which species do we save? And then, of course, we tend to save the animals first and foremost that we find beautiful or cute or sort of worthwhile. And it's a good place to start, but we really have to save ecosystems, not particular species. So, I mean, sometimes I feel like animal rescue, as it is seen in the film and as it is happening, I think it's great that people are really putting so much effort into this, but it's still a band-aid on a wound that is just too big, and it's still opening more and more. And we really have to consider stopping the problems at their roots. And like Victor also mentions, like we're destroying so much, and it's happening so fast. And it's not just a question of the future of our grandchildren, the potential future of our grandchildren. It's also the potential future or not for all living things on this planet. And we're all part of the same planet, right? So yeah, I feel like we have to reconsider everything that we're doing.
If you don't mind, I want to continue. It's not my idea. It's I steal it from Leonardo da Vinci and Lev Tolstoy. So they both saying similar things. They're saying it will come day when people will understand that to kill animal and to kill human is the same, just act of killing. And we will not improve our life, generally our life of, if we will not eliminate act of killing from our behavior, if you just forbid to kill to ourselves, because as you say, what I notice now in GUNDA is traveling around the world, and not so many public screenings, but if there are public screenings, I always have beautiful moments when young people, kids or children, coming to the microphone and asking me, why nobody told me this? This is like fantastic, interesting question, right? So, and I always say, please talk to your mom, talk to your father. Why they did not tell you? Why they did not tell you that food you are eating was alive and had intellect and emotions? So it just, and interesting that I am privileged to know such a great people. I know many great filmmakers, writers, composers, scientists. I know many absolutely stunning people and exceptionally genius, Nobel Prize winners, and they love my films, and they hug me, and then I notice, oh, they go to a restaurant and they eat meat. So they love GUNDA. They hug me and they say, yeah, it's a great movie. And then but young people, they do different. They write me mail, so I cannot live anymore like this. I cannot live in the way I used to live. I have to change my life. And they thank me every day, like 50 cents emails a day. That children and young generation people writing me that the film changed my life. So it makes me think that for people my age, and it's already kind of probably difficult to face reality, to face truth, and people just do not know. No, so they don't want to. They know exactly that we are killers, but they don't want to know because maybe it happened because. You know what happened, in my opinion? We did not notice. It happened gradually. So 100 years ago, people were eating meat only once a week. 100 years ago. 100 years ago, we were 4 times less population than now. 100 years ago, only 12% of people used to live in cities. And now 60% people live in cities. And we are almost 8 billion. And all of us eat meat every day. This is what happened. So this is why it's gradually. It's like it happened like we didn't even notice that it became monster. We created the monster, and now this monster is part of our life. And this is why I always think about Lev Tolstoy is right. He wrote this book, a short story. It's called The Story of the Horse, Halsteamer. And I recommend to read to everyone. And it's kind of story from the point of view of the horse, how she sees us human around here and other animals. So I guess Tolstoy is right. We will not improve our life. We will just a little bit socialism, a little bit communism, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, but it will be not radical improvement until we will not illuminate killing from our life. We have to stop. It just simply, I call it time to empathy revolution. It was many revolutions before. It was industrial revolution, social revolution, sexual revolution, digital revolution. It came time to empathy revolution. This is more I see it now, more I see how GUNDA works for young people, and more I'm convinced it's time came and people, because listen, I was not able to finance this film 20 years. 20 years coming from country to country, trying to, no way. And now I did. So it feels, people start getting it. People start getting it. So, and by the way, in the UK, in the US, and specifically in the UK, so many sanctuaries, so many, over 600, over 600. It's so amazing. I was traveling in the UK, searching for my characters, and I met so many great people who run sanctuaries and who helps animals, and it's unbelievable. It's so beautiful. I fall in love to the United Kingdom, because so many great people who just give their land to animals and give them chance to live until their natural death. Beautiful. So we are not so bad. There are chance, I guess. We used to kill each other by millions. We used to eat each other. And now we still suffering to accept people with different sexual orientation. We still suffering to accept people with different skin and different point of view. But we are getting a little bit better, I guess. We are getting better. And time will come, and I guess it's here. Time for empathy.
Thank you, Victor. Yeah, and I was also surprised of that with Robin's film. Like, as someone from the UK, I didn't know this network of thousands of volunteers are ready to rescue marine mammals all across the country. I guess, yeah, this is not put foot to the forefront, like the huge amount of people who are really care and really active trying to do something about, climate change and how we treat other species. We've just got a question in the chat, which I wonder if, Danielle, you would reflect on, which is about the use of language. And also this reminds me of something you've said, Victor, about you didn't use words in GUNDA or in some of your films because language puts us in this sort of rational mind or logical mind, which can stop us connecting. And then I wonder whether, Danielle, as more of a writer, how you feel about this. And also thinking of your story about Jimmy the pig. You started this story, you didn't tell us it was a pig. You told us about the grief that was being felt by a person, but it was only later that you told us. So yeah, the question I think you've probably seen in the chat. And yeah, what is your view on language's role in the change of mindset and how humans treat animals?
Yeah, it reminds me of a wonderful Yeats poem about that words reveal as much as they conceal, or they conceal as much as they reveal. And, you know, I think that there is work that we can do with language, but you so struggle when you use our language. I mean, quite apart from the words, our language individuates. So there's a subject, and then there's a verb, and then there's an object, and it's the human who gets to be the subject, who does things and who sees things and who feels things. So I think you've got to be really creative with language. But, you know, a question that I get asked a lot, and I'm sure Patrice does as well, and both Victor and Robin, people say, well, you know, aren't you worried about anthropomorphizing? And firstly, I'm much more worried about mechanomorphizing than I am anthropomorphizing, like making animals into like this other thing we think of them as, which is things. But there's there's a part in Summertime where the book that I write after the fires, where I take this on head on, and I said, well, what if we were to be less selfish with those words? What if we were to share those words with other beings? What if we were to share freedom and agency and consciousness and community and relationship and politics and law and all these words that we think belong to humans? What if we shared them with other beings? And then we saw what happened to them when other beings got to take them over. Maybe the words would become different. So, you know, I agree in principle that language constrains, but I also think it's worth being a little bit more experimental and a bit risky with language. And in the same way as I know Patrice and I, and probably, I don't want to speak for Robin and Victor, I don't know how you live, but we try and share our lives, our day-to-day lives, not just with human animals, but with other animals, and they change our lives. We become otherwise when we live together intimately like that. I think the same thing might happen with language. So that's maybe a little bit of an unusual answer to the question. I'd be interested in others' thoughts. I'm sure Patrice has something to say.
I mean, we have this part of our brain called Broca's area, which channels all of our perceptions into language, right? So infants, if they're looking at color, a certain part of their brain links up. But once they learn language, the actual visual processing changes, and the input goes to Broca's area and then out. So it's not something we can, I guess what I'm trying to say is we are language making animals, whether we like it or not. And language is embedded in our way, our thinking. And so to be aware of its failings is good, but we also more generally have to be always aware of what kind of animal we are. When we're creating these stories, whether they be stories in film or stories in words, we have to be aware of what kind of animal humans are, because we're creating these messages, you know, for humans. And humans are really language based. However, and both of these films sort of take that away from us. I mean, there's no language at all in GUNDA, and in From the Wild Sea, I mean, you do hear the humans periodically talking, but a lot of times you're just completely confused about what in the world is happening. Which is beautiful, because that lack of language then sort of throws you into the sort of same position that the non-human animal is in this hospital, where you're just looking around saying, what is going on here? I'm trying to figure this out. And then you're seeing the animals also trying to figure this out. So so that's one way that the films sort of destabilize language for us. And then in GUNDA, the language is just not there at all. And I noticed with both of the films, there's a way that this makes us, makes the world bigger, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because it's not being shunted through the language. So in GUNDA, you know, whether we're looking at the chickens coming, the hens from the battery cages, that's where I'm presuming, when they're stepping out, and we're so slowly seeing, like, language has fallen away for us then, and we're and the world is so very big, because we are hearing things, but we're hearing the insect noises, and we're hearing the birds, and we're hearing the footsteps themselves, and there's a way that this I think sort of jolts us out of that language-based way of perceiving the world and into a way of being that I think we all need to get to, which is a being within the larger than human world, rather than on top of or apart from and analyzing, like you're right there in the grass. So I thought that in both films, the way that language or the lack thereof was handled made the film much more powerful. But I'm also interested Victor, when you said that you have people tell you that they love the film and then they go eat animals. So I'm curious about a few things. Like I'm curious about whether these are both men and women or just men. So I guess that's my first question. And
yeah, it's surprisingly many people stop eating meat, but many people who also saying to me, yeah, you make me think, but I still probably will continue eating meat, and it does not. It's both women and men. But if you don't mind, I will reply on as far as a film festival, and cinema is also the language in a way, right? It's a specific language, and in my opinion, I will probably shock you, but cinema was born not like storytelling language. Cinema was born as a image show. It's like cinema is show, to show, not to tell. And it was born as a one single shot, actually. Might be story. You can find story inside that single shot, but not necessary. Cinema itself exists because it's able to show you something what you normally, as normal human, you are not able to see, or you don't want to see, or decided not to see. And cinema able to show, but I believe to protect cinema from, I know the literature and is much bigger art, but in a way, I believe cinema is much closest to nature art, because I noticed it many times when I was filming in Africa, in savanna, and other animals, and condors. I noticed that animals, when then I start reading books about it, and first I noticed myself that if animal meet another animal in savanna, he needs one look and he understands, is it dangerous animal, or is it friendly animal, or is it food, or is it a predator? So same with us. We need, shockingly, 4 seconds, only 4 seconds. When we meet new person, we need only 4 seconds to understand, is it our friend or better to be away? And we need only 17 seconds to understand, is it person I can probably make love with or never? So nature taught us to use our eyes and to read body language, to read emotions. By the way, dogs, they look to your right eye and and they need 1.2 seconds to understand your emotion. They look only in your right eye, how do you call it? How do you call it in English? I don't know. So
eyebrow.
Yeah, they looked at the right one, and they need 1.2 seconds to understand what do you feel. This is why they're so fast to emotionally help you. We also we are animals, and our eyes are huge computer, which nature taught us to understand, to receive what we see and to understand what we see. So this is why cinema is closest language to nature, and this is why I never use many words in my films. In my films, almost no words. Since beginning, I start making films. Sometimes I use words, but normally it's empty, and you just need to watch it. Anyway, it is beautiful to talk to you guys. Thank you very much. Using language.
Thank you, Victor. I like the bringer of not very good news, but we only have a few minutes left. So I wonder if, Robin, if you have reflections on this question of cinema closest to nature, and
Yeah.
also the question in the chat about your use of still frames and how you chose to film things, and whether that and yeah, just we can probably go a couple of minutes over, but we shouldn't go long over because yeah, there's other events that people might be joining. But yeah,
Right, no pressure.
just 2 minutes to sum up everything.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was also thinking also when you were talking now about, I mean, of course, cinema is a language, but I know what you mean, like written and spoken language as language, but cinema is very much a language as well. And also in the work with From the Wild Sea, we were working very much with how to construct particularly the animal perspective. And it was very clear from the beginning that we had to work with these long takes and very few words. If anyone is saying something, there's a few people talking sometimes, like you mentioned, Patrice, but this is not the driving force in the film. It's not at all an information-based film. It's it works with intuition and feelings and a development in feelings, such as fear and confusion sometimes. I really like, Patrice, that you had this, you were able to step into the place of this particular animal that doesn't know where it is. It's been taken out of nature and placed in a humanly constructed situation or surroundings. And it's this feeling of total confusion that I really wanted to transmit. So I didn't want to explain anything about where we are at the moment or what is happening. And yeah, so I really enjoyed hearing that you were able to get this out of the film. But yeah, we're avoiding to edit a lot. There's no like cutting from one detail to another detail, like making the viewer just look at what I direct them to see. I don't want them to direct them to see any particular thing. I want them to just be there in the moment in real time and be there with the animal, experiencing this moment with the animal. And yeah, this is the reason, I mean, that we decided to use no voiceover, no music, no fast editing, just to construct this perspective. Really sort of to use as few human constructions as possible to create each scene. Of course, we have to use a camera, but I didn't want to add any music or any other human element, really, but just to let the animals, the nature, the moment be there as it is. So yeah, we worked a lot with the construction of another kind of language that is not word driven. Yeah, I guess that was what I wanted to say about the language.
Great, thank you, Robin. I've just put some links in the chat for the rest of the program. We have talks later today and a few more talks tomorrow that I hope will be as rich and inspiring and somehow emotional as this discussion was. I don't know if anyone has any last remarks that they would like to share, or maybe I close up. Do you have something to add, Victor?
Yeah, I just want to thank you because you see how we start talking differently, right? It's an absolutely different conversation. We start listen. It means we notice that we are not alone. There are creatures around us, and they have rights to be here, and they have rights to be happy, same as we. So thank you for this calm and deep conversation. Thank you very much. I want to hug all of you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just also really want to say thank you. It's really been really nice to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you both for creating these extraordinary films that provoke people to have empathy, to in some ways see the world through the eyes of non-human others, and hopefully to feel themselves a little smaller in relation to non-human animals and the larger than human world, while at the same time maybe seeing some possibilities for different ways of being in relationship. Really, thank you both.
And the only thing that I would add, because what you've all said is so beautiful, is I just want to acknowledge what it takes to stand in the face of truth, the way that you do to create your art, because that takes heart, and that, I mean, we tend to say that takes resilience and courage, but I think it takes love, and it's so important to be in the truth.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, as everyone said, thank you for the films. Thank you for letting us show them as part of Sheffield Doc Fest. And thank you to Patrice and Danielle for joining and, yeah, making this really beautiful conversation.